9. Missouri street dancer gets sucker punched. In 2020, two preteens and their instructor were street dancing on camera in Cape Girardeau, Missouri one night, when one of the students was viciously attacked, seemingly out of nowhere. The trio were taking turns performing when the 12-year-old, nicknamed Eamon, got up to dance and was joined by a man who was seen getting out of a nearby SUV. At first, the stranger appeared to be dancing along with Eamon, but after inching closer and closer, he punched the boy in the side of the head and knocked him onto the ground. Eamon's instructor, Michael Crank Curry, tried to chase after the perpetrator, who got back into the waiting SUV and fled the scene right after delivering the unprovoked punch. It's clear, based on the footage of the ordeal, that Eamon was severely injured, but he managed to stand on his own 2 feet as bystanders rushed over to help. Eamon was taken to the hospital where he received treatment for a concussion and a nosebleed. He told police that he didn't have any idea who his attacker was or why he was targeted, but that it was a random act of violence. Shortly after the incident, law enforcement announced felony charges against the suspect, 27-year-old Cedric Charles Moore Jr. He pleaded guilty to second-degree assault and received a 7-year prison sentence. 8. Dave Chappelle. Controversial comedian Dave Chappelle was in the middle of a performance in Los Angeles earlier this year when an audience member suddenly rushed the stage and attacked him. Security officers stepped in and removed the suspect, who police later identified as 23-year-old Isaiah Lee. The attacker was later seen being taken from the venue on a stretcher with visible injuries to his face and arms, which he reportedly incurred in the process of being detained by security. Police charged Lee with felony assault with a deadly weapon and reported that he was armed with a replica gun that ejects a knife blade. Naturally, Chappelle made light of the situation by making jokes, but it was a pretty serious situation that could have probably turned out much worse if nobody had been quick to intervene. Lee pleaded not guilty to his alleged role in the attack and was ordered to stay 100 yards, 330 feet, away from Chappelle at all times. In court, he revealed that he identifies as bisexual and felt triggered by something the comedian said during the performance. Lee also said that as a single dad who experienced a brush with homelessness at one point in his life, he also felt put off by things that Chappelle said about homeless people. He said that he hoped the attack would send the message that perhaps the performer should run his material by people who might be affected by it before writing it into his show. 7. Dancers destroyed by giant monitor. A boy band called Mirror was performing in Hong Kong recently when a giant video monitor suddenly fell from the ceiling, landing right on top of one of the dancers. The device knocked the performer straight onto his back and pinned him to the floor, before falling onto its side and landing on top of another dancer. At least 2 and as many as 3 people were hurt in the collapse, according to the local news reports. The music stopped immediately as the band's managers asked horrified audience members to leave the arena. Several female attendees were reportedly treated for shock after witnessing the traumatic incident. It's unclear which of the boy band's 12 members were injured, but Hong Kong police confirmed that 2 people were hospitalized. A local hospital confirmed that one dancer was in serious condition with a neck injury and was placed in intensive care, while another was stable, according to the South China Morning Post. In the meantime, the city ordered for the rest of the group's tour to be put on hold while safety concerns are addressed and a thorough investigation is carried out. 6. Sam Panda. In 2020, professional aerialist Sam Panda was at Myrtle Beach in South Carolina with some friends when police came and told them that they had received a complaint about her attire. Footage taken at the scene shows officers handcuffing Ms. Panda and walking her to her car while she asked which law specifically forbids beachgoers from wearing thong bikinis. The officers alleged that she was guilty of public nudity, to which Panda repeatedly argued that she wasn't nude. But as it turned out, the city of Myrtle Beach actually does have a policy against wearing thongs. According to the Daily Mail, Panda begged the officers to let her go. They removed her handcuffs, but continued to argue with her about the reasons for her detainment. Luckily, she and a friend, who police also received a complaint about, were released without any charges. In a Facebook post, Panda didn't criticize the officers who responded to the call, but she complained about the so-called Karen, who reported her for wearing something that she truly did not feel was inappropriate. At one time, police in Myrtle Beach had a policy of warning visitors who were caught wearing thongs. But in 2009, 16 years after the thong ban went into effect, the city decided to become less forgiving and instructed officers to ticket people right away instead of warning them. So while Panda felt that her experience was an injustice, she was actually fortunate that she didn't receive any citations. 5. Enrique Iglesias. During a concert in Tijuana, Mexico in 2016, Latin singer Enrique Iglesias reached out to grab a drone that he planned to use to film the audience with. He had done the stunt numerous times before and garnered a positive reaction from the audience, but this time turned out much differently. Iglesias wrapped his hand around the wrong part of the device, causing the propellers to cut his fingers and leaving him seriously injured and bleeding on stage. Despite the severity of the singer's wounds, he only stopped the show long enough for paramedics to bandage his hand, and then went straight back to performing. Speaking with Univision's Primer Impacto a year after the incident, Iglesias said that he honestly didn't feel much at the time due to the amount of adrenaline that was coursing through his body, and that he was surprised by how much blood he was losing. He further explained that he was ashamed and embarrassed that his fans had to see it happen, especially those who were right up front and caught an extra close glimpse of the gory details. Every time I would move my hand, you could just see blood everywhere, he said. It wasn't until after surgery that Iglesias recalled feeling any pain. In hindsight, he blamed himself for the incident. "What I did was a huge stupidity." His hand required extensive reconstructive surgery. Even after undergoing the procedure, he was left without feeling in one of his fingers. But all things considered, Iglesias is probably lucky that he didn't actually lose any of his digits. And his fans were probably more than understanding about the medical emergency, especially after seeing how dedicated he was to finishing the show. 4. Curtis Gilchrist. 52-year-old Curtis Gilchrist was busking on an Asheville, North Carolina sidewalk last year when 3 people approached and attacked him. They stole his tip jar and left him injured enough to need emergency medical care. Asheville is known for its lively street scene, but things have gotten unusually quiet over the last year or so due to a spate of violent incidents involving performers. Police noted that the most alarming aspect of the attack against Gilchrist was that it happened in broad daylight. At the time the news broke, law enforcement was still on the lookout for the suspect. It's unclear whether they ever caught him. Shortly after the incident, busker Lyle Rickards told local station WLOS that he had been robbed and assaulted more times throughout the year than he had before, and that his fellow performers had also reported more attacks in 2021 than in previous years. He further pointed out that buskers are like sitting ducks for attackers, and that the city will lose its buskers, which are an integral part of its culture, if more isn't done to stop the violence from happening. In addition to targeting street performers, criminals appear to be going after vulnerable homeless people, sometimes with completely senseless acts. One woman was shot in the face with an airsoft gun, while another man and his cat were nearly run over on purpose. Asheville Police Lieutenant Russell Crisp reassured the public that the department was doing everything they could to keep a closer eye on the streets, and that any time that any crimes occur in Asheville, there is always concern. He also noted that the agency has assigned as many officers as possible to the downtown area in an effort to restore a sense of public safety. 3. John Jazz Agilo. Known among New Yorkers as the "dancing is happiness" guy, saxophone player John Jazz Agilo is a mainstay of the Big Apple's Herald Square subway station. For 5 years, he's entertained commuters and tourists alike with his music and a surrounding handful of dancing toy animals without any issues. That all changed recently when NYPD officers surrounded Agilo and told him that his busking days were over. they ordered him to pack up and leave. In response, he insisted that he wasn't committing a crime. But the boys in blue were evidently in no mood to talk things out, and viral footage shows them taking Agilo's saxophone away while wrestling him into a pair of handcuffs. The musician's arrest was met with widespread outrage among those who have come to know and enjoy his performances, as well as those who simply don't think he was doing any harm. The NYPD, on the other hand, claimed to have received numerous complaints from transit workers claiming that Agilo's act interfered with pedestrian traffic and that he had failed to comply with repeated orders to leave the subway station. Additionally, the agency said that officers took Agilo into custody after he failed to provide them with his ID. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who based his election campaign largely on his promise to tackle crime, released a statement commending the officers for what he described as their professional conduct. Meanwhile, Agilo's supporters are standing by him. He has received overwhelming financial support through a GoFundMe campaign to cover his living expenses while he works out his legal issues, which has raised over $118,000 so far. 2. Machine Gun Kelly. Colson Baker, better known as Machine Gun Kelly, was performing for a sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden in New York City recently when his behavior took a bizarre, sudden turn. He lost his cool seemingly out of nowhere and began acting erratically toward the end of the show when he stormed off stage and began screaming at a crew member. Another employee managed to restrain MGK as he unraveled. In the meantime, the band continued to play for the audience. Moments later, the rapper turned rock star made his way back out onto the stage and smashed a guitar. The strange stunts didn't end there. After the show, MGK was partying at a high-end Manhattan venue when he decided to smash a champagne flute against his head. He was left bleeding from the unhinged display, but ignored the injury and went on to perform a song for the fan-packed establishment. Machine Gun Kelly has experienced some dark times in recent years, including struggles with drug addiction and the loss of his father, which nearly drove him to take his own life. But it's unclear whether his recent outburst had anything to do with his emotional difficulties or if it was triggered by something else. Who knows, maybe he even did it for fun. 1. Carlos Santana. Legendary musician Carlos Santana was performing in Clarkston, Michigan recently as part of his Miraculous Supernatural 2022 tour when he sat down at his drum set, lost consciousness, and fell backwards. He was in the middle of his song Joy when the emergency occurred, unexpectedly cutting the concert short. To those who knew that Santana had undergone an emergency heart procedure months earlier that had forced him to cancel several shows, the incident was nothing short of concerning. The 74-year-old was quickly surrounded by medical personnel, who removed him from the stage and rushed him to the emergency room. Footage shows Santana being carried away while his fans cheer for him in a touching display of support, showing that they cared more about his well-being than the fact that the concert unexpectedly ended early. The singer can be seen waving to audience members as he's taken to get his medical treatment. A representative for Santana asked the audience to leave shortly after he fell, but many stuck around out of shock and presumably because they were curious to see if he was okay. Shortly after the alarming incident, a representative told People magazine that Santana was under observation at a local hospital after being overcome with heat exhaustion and dehydration, and that he was doing well. In a Facebook post, the musician said that he had forgotten to eat and drink water, causing him to pass out. He thanked his fans for their precious prayers. Several of Santana's shows were postponed, but it appears as though he recovered from the ordeal. Thanks for watching. Would you rather intervene on a thief trying to steal a street performer's tip jar, or have the wrong people find out that you gave police footage of them assaulting a performer? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.